Bom dia a todos e todas. Nós estamos hoje com um evento muito importante, né? Este debate, na verdade, será feito em inglês, tendo em vista que as nossas palestrantes não têm o domínio da língua portuguesa, mas é possível ativar a legenda automática pelo YouTube, nas configurações aqui de baixo. E hoje nós vamos falar com duas representantes da ONG UAIMI, né? E esta live está sendo apresentada pelo Grupo de Estudos em Justiça Restaurativa, USP Restaura, vinculado à Faculdade de Direito de Ribeirão Preto, FDRP, da Universidade de São Paulo, USP, com coordenação do professor Eduardo Saad Diniz e organização da professora Cristina Oliveira. E vamos iniciar as perguntas direcionadas às palestrantes. Como eu falei, hoje nós vamos ter o prazer de receber duas representantes da ONG UAIMI, situada em Londres, na Inglaterra, e o UAIMI faz um trabalho com vítimas aplicando a justiça restaurativa, principalmente em relação aos crimes de violência de gênero. Então, hoje nós temos aqui conosco Linda Millington, que é vice-diretora da UAIMI, e além de Lucy Fry, que é também sobrevivente de violência doméstica, passou por práticas restaurativas e hoje ela é embaixadora da ONG. Nós pedimos que as perguntas sejam feitas no chat, né, com direcionamento para alguma das participantes, e em seguida nós vamos traduzir e ao final do evento iremos trazer essas perguntas para as nossas debatedoras. Então, estou aqui com Lara Zago também, e nós vamos começar agora com Lucy, aliás, com Linda, e depois nós trazemos Lucy para o debate. Lara, fica à vontade, se quiser começar a fazer aí também a introdução em inglês, é com você.
Hi, so now a bit in English. Good morning, Brazilians, and good afternoon, UK. Welcome to the live seminar, Why Me? The Application of Restorative Justice in Cases of Gender-Based Violence. My name is Lara Zago. I'm a member of the study group USP Restaura, as well as Júlia Poletine. So our group aims to bring together researchers to discuss restorative practices applied to different types of conflict in Brazil. And today's event is a part of a project born this year called Restorative Dialogues. We chose to start the debate with the organization Why Me, based in London, because Why Me is internationally known for encouraging restorative practices. It's a great pleasure to welcome into our university Linda Millington and Lucy Fry. Thank you both for coming and having this very important dialogue with us today. So, Linda is a restorative facilitator and has worked for victim support in Sussex and for restorative justice services in Kent and Medway. She's been through different restorative practices and has specialized in cases of sexual and domestic violence. She's been with Why Me since 2009 and is now the deputy director. And Lucy is a survivor of domestic violence who's had the opportunity to participate in restorative conferences with Why Me and has agreed to share a bit of her experience with us. Lucy has been a Why Me ambassador for 2 years, speaking about her experience with restorative justice. So once again, thank you both for coming, and would you like to say something before we start? Maybe introduce yourselves a little bit?
Well, thank you, Lara. I think you've introduced us really well there, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk today about restorative justice in with gender-based violence cases, because we know there are people are scared, they may be fearful of offering restorative justice in those cases, and we hope when you hear from Lucy you can see why we want to use restorative justice and offer it to all survivors of crime.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. The process for me was the best thing I've ever done with my life. I can honestly say that. Life-saving, I would say. It was a life-saving opportunity. And for me, I'm so passionate about this, and I'm so passionate to get across that it's not a professional's decision to make before they've even met you to say, no, this is not for you. This is too dangerous. It is not right. I would have found other ways to have got my answers, which would not have been safe, which would not have been... I dread to think where we might have ended up had I have not had my conference with Linda. So, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me all the way to Brazil. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. We are so happy and honored to have you here. So let's start with Linda. First of all, we would like to understand better about the beginning of Why Me, and about also your restorative justice career. So Linda, how did Why Me come about? How did the project start, and what were you seeking with it?
Okay, so Why Me started with a crime, and it then started about 20 years ago now with a restorative meeting. So Will Riley is a London businessman, and one night he was burgled and attacked by Peter Wolf, and Peter was caught. It was a very serious assault, and to cut a long story short, the two met in prison some years later. And Peter was in and out of prison since a young age, all of his life. He was a drug addict. He abused alcohol and basically committed crime to fund his habits. And so back in, say, nearly 20 years ago, Peter was offered the opportunity on a pilot project to take part in restorative justice, and Will obviously agreed to do that. And Peter is pretty honest to say that he only sat in that room because he wanted to get out of his prison cell for a few hours, and he thought, I've talked the talk before. I can do this again. I can just, get myself out of this by saying what everyone thinks they're going to hear. But actually, it was quite a life-changing experience for Peter, because there wasn't just Will there. There was, I think, some of Will's family there, and another victim of Peter's crime. And Will really held Peter to account for what he's done. And it was the first time Peter had really heard about the impact of his actions, of what he does, of all of his crime. And he came out of that room thinking he was just going in so he could have a few hours out of his cell and a biscuit. But he actually came out of that cell and decided, when I get out of prison, I'm going to change my life. And that is the power of restorative justice. And he hasn't. 20 years later, Peter has never committed a crime. He's substance misuse free. He doesn't drink. He doesn't take drugs. He's a very strong advocate for restorative justice. He's an academic now and very happy. He lives in Sweden. We still see him occasionally as well. But what was, I think, probably quite frustrating for both of them at the time is in England or the UK at that time, there wasn't a lot of restorative justice happening. It was very patchy, and it was very much if you were lucky if you got it. So Will decided, with Peter's help, that they would set up Why Me to campaign for victims to get greater access to restorative justice. And that's where we've gone from there. We now talk about not just victims, we widen ourselves to restore. We're opening access to anyone affected by crime can access restorative justice. And we're called Why Me for the very reason that's the number one question that victims of crime ask. Why me? Why was I targeted? Or did they target me? And hence the name of the organisation. And we've grown quite a lot over the 10 years that we've been operational. We very much started out as on the campaigning side to talk about with government, to get restorative justice on the agenda and get the message out there. One of our first projects was called an observer program, where we would have police constables, MPs, politicians, and give them the opportunity to see restorative justice, to see the face-to-face meetings between the victims and offenders happen. Move on a few years. We now, in 2015, we decided that we needed to run our own restorative justice service, because what we found is there was not uniform funding for restorative justice across the UK. So survivors and victims of crime were coming to us and saying, I really want to do this, but I can't do this in my local area. And that was the very reason why me started. And particularly as we developed, and restorative justice has extended a lot in the United Kingdom, we were finding that people were coming to us to say, for cases like sexual abuse and domestic abuse, saying, we can't get this from our local service, can you help? And I'll talk more about the power of RJJ in the moment. But where Why Me really works with is, we want to look at those areas where people may think that using restorative justice is a challenge, and we want to gather the evidence to say, look, this is how you can use restorative justice, this is the reason why, and here are the cases and the ambassadors and the people who've been through this to show why. So we've done a lot of work with hate crime, particularly with people who have learning disabilities and autism. We're looking at the use of RJ there at the moment. We've done a lot of work with LGBT hate crime, and what we have found is a lot of people want to use restorative justice, not just when there's been a crime in the criminal justice, which has got in the criminal justice system, but also when harm might have been caused by someone else that doesn't lead a crime. So say if someone feels like they've been discriminated against by a bar or a club or a gymnasium. And so our practical work very much influences what we call our policy work. And that's when our policy work is working with government, working with local authorities and agencies to say, look, hey, we can use restorative justice. And we are starting to develop this very much the feeling of in the domestic abuse and sexual abuse area. So Why Me, since 2015, has always had these worked with these cases. The restorative justice picture has changed quite a lot since 2015 in England and Wales, where in 2015 there was very little going on. Now each police area has its own funded restorative justice service. But the provision is still patchy, and some services do not still take particularly domestic abuse cases for restorative justice.
Yeah, so I was thinking, how did you decide to start applying restorative justice?
Generally, or to domestic abuse and sexual abuse cases?
Okay. Was it something that you thought it might be useful, it might be great at the time, efficient? Well, what did you,
I mean, there's
think?
lots of different reasons. I mean, I think it is on both sides. It's the knowing the power of how it helps and heals victims. It gives victims the chance to gain closure. It gives the chance to answer those questions, and we probably all know that all practitioners can say the stories of, oh, I've had my restorative meeting, that's the first time I've been able to sleep through the night in years. And on the other side, it obviously, for offenders, or as we like to say, people who've caused harm, it gives them the chance to apologise. It gives them a chance to understand the impact of what they've done. And it is part of a life-changing process. And research in England and Wales has shown that it has a tremendous rate on reoffending. So, or preventing reoffending. And I could give you the figures. It's something like it's 14% do not go on to reoffend as a result of taking part in restorative justice. So in this country, it has an economic benefit as well, because the money you put into, and I forgive like Peter as an example, Peter's estimated that about 20,000 victims have not been victims as a result of him not committing crime. Sorry, there's lots of negatives in there. But, and you think about then, okay, that's the great cost on, the mental health and people losing days off work because of mental health issues and stress. It's days lost from economic productivity. And certainly when I've worked a lot in prisons and worked with offenders who they've gone on a victim awareness course, and that's really brought it home to them that there is a victim out there and they want to meet that person to say sorry. But often they think sorry is not good enough. They don't like the word sorry. They say it's a very empty word, but it is part of that life-changing process. And I see it as a practitioner, but it's when you hear Lucy in a short while, who really can sort of show about the real difference it has.
Yeah, I think for us Brazilians here in Brazil, maybe in all Latin America, it's kind of hard for us to picture how to apply restorative justice here, right, Lara? Lara, I think she agrees with me, because we are hearing your experience, and I am thinking, whoa, maybe we can do it, but how? In our country, with our limitations. Okay, we need funding, so it's kind of hard to picture, and you're doing such an amazing job. Like, I'm such a fan of your work, your hard work, and you give us hope to start something here soon. Because we really we really believe in restorative justice. So I would like to ask you, Linda, what types of restorative practices do you use? And do you think any model fits better for cases of gender-based violence, for example?
Okay, me, I as a practitioner, the right restorative process is dependent on what the victim and the offender want, and what is safe. So we have done, and I've said they're not common. We do use the face-to-face meetings between victims and offenders, as in Lucy's case, where that sometimes, and a victim has sort of said that to me this morning, is the only person that can give me the answers to my questions is the person responsible. And hence the reason why, and they want to look them in the eye. They want to see for themselves that a person has changed, or that their answers to their questions are genuine. So that's why we're very, a restorative meeting between victim and offender is like what we would call the gold standard. It has the most impact for both parties. But we recognise that not everybody wants to meet their offender. So we might want to do letter exchanges where both parties write to each other through the facilitator and get answers to questions that way, or to explain the impact. We might use video recordings or audio recordings where one party says what they want to say, but they don't feel comfortable with meeting the other person. We use something called shuttle mediation. And shuttle mediation is when a practitioner like me will pass the information between the parties, and do it that way. And that way, again, because they feel more comfortable doing it that way, and it's safe. But what I'm a really strong advocate of is a restorative process, which is ultimately about communication, doesn't necessarily have to result in direct communication between a victim and offender. The model we use when we're talking to victims of crime can help them gain their own closure or understand the impact or the to help them understand more to what's happened for them. So the model that we use is we have a set of what we call the restorative questions, and they are: what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? What are you thinking and feeling now? What has been the hardest thing? Who's been affected by what happened? And what can be done to make things better? And sometimes just having a conversation with a victim or an offender and using those questions as a model can help people make sense of what's happened to them. And in a really strange way, one of the central tenets of restorative justice is that it's voluntary for everybody to take part in. Because there'd be no point. If you force somebody to do this, then it's just going to re-victimize people because they're not going to get the answers that they want. So even if someone says no, and you're supporting a victim of crime through that process using those questions, they're getting a closure. They might be what the closure that they wanted when they first started this process, because it might tell them a lot about the other person. But it may be, I'm going to say, I'll use Lucy as an example. Many victims do not have the chance to have their day in court, to have their say in court, because the offender has pleaded guilty, and they feel that they don't have a voice, where restorative justice very much puts the emphasis on people having their voice. So to answer your questions, Julia, I think we will use whatever type of restorative process is what people want to have and what they feel comfortable with. We have one of our other ambassadors who was victim of a hate crime on a public bus. She was being verbally abused on the bus, and the bus driver didn't take her seriously. She has learning disabilities. And her restorative process was that she wanted to make a video about her experience that could be shown in schools, so then children could understand the impact. So, we're open to anything. We're open to whatever is right for the circumstances.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing such incredible stories. But Linda, what is the overall result of these practices? Like,
yes.
Is there satisfaction? You said there's a lot of satisfaction involved. But do you think restorative justice, on the other hand, is capable of causing some kind of victimization? Sometimes, in some cases, maybe. And what are the biggest risks of applying this practice, in your opinion? Is there any?
Yeah. I mean, research in this country has shown that 85% of victims who've gone through restorative justice are happy with the process. Okay. So there's lots of, with different types of case, there is always the fear that someone will be re-victimized. So one of the things we look for as practitioners, and I will talk more about sort of particularly in domestic abuse cases and sexual abuse cases, is about what's the level of acceptance of responsibility on the part of the offender. And we will ask questions like, does the offender blame the victim in any way for what happened? What is the level of remorse that they are showing? They may admit that they did it, but then they may sort of justify their actions, or she was wearing I'm going to say a really basic thing. She was wearing a short skirt. She led me on, therefore I thought I could do this. And that's really something that we do throughout the preparation for restorative justice. And we're always having honest conversations with both parties to say, well, what if they say no? What if they say that you were responsible for what happened? Or, you know, the person is still denying that they raped you. How do you feel about that? And we treat those cases with such caution, but we always want the victim to make the decision for themselves of what's best for them, and helping them in that preparation to kind of weigh up the risks and the benefits of doing restorative justice. And there are cases where an offender has not said anything during a restorative meeting, but in one particular case, the victim wanted to have her say. She wanted to just read her statement. She didn't care whether the offender said anything or not. And what she wanted to do was leave the room first, because and so the offender only saw the back of her head. And that was a really powerful thing. It may sound like a small thing, but the most powerful part of that conference, because the last thing she saw of the offender when he committed the crime was the back of his head. And it is, you know, I bring Lucy in, you know, Lucy's the offender in Lucy's case. Quite clearly, he did admit it and showed remorse for what he did. But you know, and I found with the domestic abuse and sexual abuse cases, the level of satisfaction and change of lives is so great compared to, I don't want to stereotype, but compared to a burglary case or a robbery case, because it is the cases, and Lucy, I hope you don't mind me saying this, is we you know, you've said to me, I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for restorative justice. And I've seen victims go from, I'm very in a privileged position because I work with people who've been through restorative justice 2 to 3 years later, and I see the long-term effects. I see how it has changed people's lives, how it's not just changed the individuals, but it's changed their families' lives as well. So that is why I never want to say no when someone comes to me to say I want to do restorative justice. I have sometimes there are cases, obviously, concerns where it wouldn't be safe to do a face-to-face meeting, but it might be safe to do something else. But in other cases where it's not safe, it isn't safe to do it at all, because there's a risk of violence, or there is a, you know, in some cases, I have worked with cases where victims do want to re-establish the relationship with their ex-partners, and that's not safe to do.
Yeah, so in your opinion, restorative justice potential is so much bigger than any risks of applying it?
I think you obviously have to be aware of those risks. And we here, I mean, myself and other practitioners, we do go through specialist training to work with sexual abuse and domestic abuse cases. So, which is really, really important. So we can understand the context. We can understand particularly what we would call trauma-informed practice. So we understand how trauma affects people, not just the victims, but also the offenders as well, and how that may lead to certain display of behaviours and how they approach life. So we have to be aware of that. I don't like to say no, I have to admit, to when a victim comes forward, because I know the power of restorative justice. But there are times when I have to be realistic to say, no, this is not suitable.
Here in Brazil, some part of researchers think that restorative justice can only be applied for minor crimes, like so many people in here, it's always saying, no, but we can't apply restorative justice in domestic violence crimes, in sex abuse crimes. So I want to know a bit more. You told us about your experience and everything in this type of in this kind of crime, but why apply restorative justice to crimes with offensive potentials, such as sex crimes and domestic violence crimes? Do you think restorative justice should have some application limit depending on the type of crime, or can be applied to any crime?
I mean, personally, I think restorative justice can be considered for any crime. But I think what is important is who is asking for restorative justice. So if it's a victim, then I will do my utmost to see what can do, whether it's domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, whether it's child abuse within a family, historic sexual abuse, or there are services that do a lot of work on child on parent domestic abuse. But I think where I am cautious is if an offender comes forward to do and says, I would like to meet my domestic abuse victim. And it does happen. And I'm kind of like, well, what is the motivation for this? Is this to do with control? Do they want to re-victimize? What is the motivation for doing that? And we do not do restorative justice in those cases. Now, what I would say, what might be important is I would still want to have a conversation with the based on those questions I talked about earlier about what happened, who's been affected, etc. Because again, it's about them realizing what the impact of their crime was. And I may consider, I mean, if we talk what we call about the ripple effect, it is not just the victim and the offender who's been affected by what's happened. It might be that we could do a piece of restorative work with the offender's family. So there's understanding there, and understanding how her mothers, brothers, and sisters had been affected by what happened, and in reintegrating the offender back into their family. So, I'm always willing to consider, but I have to be absolutely sure of the reasons why. And I think that is the biggest problem in this country is, I think I've already mentioned it, it's the fear of offering restorative justice. And it is, I think Lucy's already mentioned it, it's about professionals making judgments on behalf of victims to what they think is right for them. And Lucy is and other our ambassadors have very much taught me about who's the best person to know what's right for them. It's the victim themselves.
So you think you are talking about some problems that you have in there, but do you think the government should help somehow, should give some funding to maybe, I don't know, help a bit more these projects on restorative justice? Who helps you?
Okay.
Do you have any help, or can we help somehow?
Okay, so how funding works in England and Wales is there are 43 police forces, and each police force is headed up by a person called the Police and Crime Commissioner, and they are responsible for funding police and victim services in each of their areas. So some of that money is drawn down from central government, some of it from local taxes. And the Police and Crime Commissioner decides how much money is given to restorative justice. So already you can see what's happened. There's no sort of minimum level of funding that each service must have. So it's different across those 43 areas about how much funding is given and what cases are funded. So we are very much, but why me sits as because we're a charity. We sit independently across from this. So we pick up the cases that the other services don't do, and we would love to have more funding to do that. So what we are campaigning for is, again, it's about equal access, that all of those 43 services have the same criteria for accepting cases. In this country, we have something called the Victim Code of Practice, and that sets out the rights that victims have when a crime has been committed. And one of the rights says that all victims of crime should have access to information about restorative justice. Now, that's very different from saying all victims have the right to be referred to a restorative service, which is what Me is campaigning for.
Thank you, Linda. I was just reorganizing my sound in here.
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry. But in your opinion, I was wondering, I don't know your criminal justice system.
Yeah.
I only know Brazil. But do you think your traditional criminal justice system can help those victims, or no? Or you don't think it's possible? You think that the best option is to go through restorative practices? Because here in Brazil, what we understand is that our system can do anything for the victims, like, and we find many cases of re-victimization, like especially in domestic abuse, in sex crimes, with women. Women are always victimized by the state.
Yes.
So do you think the same thing happens to you in your country, maybe in your city? I don't know.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Lucy will talk about this as well. But what we do find that, domestic abuse, sexual abuse victims, not in Lucy's case, but many of them say, I had to fight for restorative justice. And it was quite a strong battle for restorative justice, because the professionals that they came across said no, or why do you want to do this? I think some of the ambassadors we work with, that they feel that their whole journey through the criminal justice system, from the point of reporting the crime through to sentencing and then beyond, is a battle, and it re-victimizes them. That the system re-victimizes them. I think I might actually leave that question for Lucy, because she can talk more about her actual experience of the criminal justice system compared to me, who's not been I have been a victim of crime, but obviously not in the same kind of way. And I think it is back to that point, is what is important for anyone working in the criminal justice system, whether that is the police officers, whether it's the victims, the support officers working with victims, whether it's the people that help victims when they go to court, whether it's then the prison service or our probation services working with offenders. What's really is important is that they're listening, and they can pick up when someone might be interested in exploring restorative justice and making that offer. And it's not just a one-time offer. It's an offer from the day that the crime's committed to right through. There's no time limit to restorative justice. And I think that's where the United Kingdom has still got a way to go.
So, in your opinion, what is the most significant potential of restorative justice? Of course, you've been talking a lot about how you believe we should apply it, but can you think of something about, like, some results or some case specifically that you've been through, that you helped the victim, the offender, the community? What do you think is, like, something that restorative justice can be really helpful and effective?
Yes, I mean, on an individual basis, that is about reducing the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. It is about working alongside counselling services For some people, counselling is great and it has its place. But then we've had victims say to us, well, actually, the restorative justice was what I needed, not the counselling. I think it is sort of, it's not just about how we deal with things when crime has happened. It's about how we can embed a restorative, what we call restorative principles, in our general way of dealing with each other when there's been harm. There's a growing movement in this country when restorative approaches are used in schools. So children understand what it means to be respectful, what it means to be listened, to listen and to be listened to. And that when we use it within Why Me as an organization, when colleagues have a misunderstanding or fall out, and that we have the confidence to say to each other, this made me feel like this. And then, well, how can we sort this out to how can we work better in the future? So I think it isn't just the potential of what I call restorative justice within a criminal context. It's that wider society type approach about how we all work and deal with, communicate with each other.
I thought of something right now. What do you think about restorative justice relation with trauma? Maybe it can be helpful.
Yes.
Like big traumas, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you see this?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if I've got 100% answer to this. I think it is. With trauma, obviously, people go around in a cycle of how, you know, where in your recovery from trauma, and it's about the right moment for where a restorative justice can fit into that. And I'm not saying that, you know, restorative justice replaces counselling or therapy, because they do two very different things, and it's how they work together. But again, it's we don't do restorative justice with domestic and abuse and sexual abuse cases in isolation. We work with the other professionals who are also supporting the participants to see, you know, conversations about, well, how is this going to have an effect on people's mental health? And if it is, how can they be supported to deal with that? And in one case, it wasn't a domestic or sexual abuse, that I went to see an offender in prison who the day before had seriously self-harmed, not quite hospitalized, but quite obvious what had happened, because they were having extreme anxiety issues about other things. And we had a conversation with them and with this person's probation officer, and the conclusion was, well, actually restorative justice is a very positive thing. This can provide a positive element to this person's life where everything else might not be going particularly well, and something to focus on. So that person was right at the, you know, the lowest point of their trauma, so to speak. But we still thought restorative justice might be a good thing to do.
Thank you, Linda. I honestly could hear you all day long. I'm loving talking to you. You are providing us with incredible information. I remember the first time I heard about Why Me, I was only 18 years old. I was studying law in my university, and I was like, it's possible. We can really apply it, because I was starting my restorative justice theoretical studies, and I was like, okay, it's good. I understand the concept, but how to apply it? I don't think it's possible. And then I found out about Why Me, and I was like, no, but they are doing it. They are really doing it. And since then, I've been such a fan of your work. And now you are sharing all those important informations with us. So we feel really honored, and I feel inspired. I want to go to London to work with you, to help you guys. Maybe one day.
maybe we can come to Brazil one day.
Yeah, come. It would be a pleasure, because I think we really need to learn with you and how to start effectively applying this practice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Brazil.
not saying from day one, go out and do restorative justice with domestic abuse and sexual abuse cases. I'm just saying be open to the possibility of using restorative justice. And that might be a long-term goal. I mean, you know, the services I've worked for, we at the first, we didn't do restorative justice with those cases because, to be fair, we didn't have the experience. And I think, Lucy, you know this was the first case I took to conference with domestic abuse. And we're still learning, but we're learning. What I haven't also said is actually something else is what's really important is case supervision, that we as practitioners are supported all the way through the process, not only for our own emotional health, but to really check that we are going in the right direction, and that having someone external to give those fresh ideas, just to that check-in to make sure that we're doing everything as good as possible.
Thank you so much, Linda. It was amazing to hear a bit about your experience and how this amazing project started. You make us believe that it's possible to think about responsible and efficient application of restorative justice. So thank you so much. Maybe now we can pass to Lara, who is going to ask Lucy some questions. And of course, you can talk with Lucy about the things that you've done there. Don't worry, you can talk about your experience at any time. Okay, feel free. We are here to hear you both. And we are excited to hear from you, Lucy, and understand more about your experience with restorative practices. So now Lara is with you. Feel free to start.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Lucy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. So once again, thank you very much, Linda, for talking to us today and for sharing your experiences. And Lucy, thank you so much for being with us, and listening a bit more about your experience is very important to us. So as Julia said, restorative practices have begun very recently in Brazil, and only in 2010, the National Justice Council has started regulating the matter, which means that we're still on the first baby steps when it comes to restorative justice. And therefore, we truly need this international dialogue. And we are truly honored to have you here with us. And if that's okay with you, maybe we can start by understanding a bit about your relationship with restorative justice itself. So how was your first encounter with restorative justice? And did you know these practices before you actually tried them?
I didn't. I'd never heard of restorative justice. I didn't know it was a thing. I just kind of knew that I needed something, but I wasn't sure what that was. To give you some context, if I could start kind of at the beginning with the offence and take you through my journey, would that be okay?
Sure. It's your space.
I was in an abusive relationship. I couldn't see any way out. I had been to the police. I had got an injunction. There had been previous arrests. He was a known violent offender. And I always thought that the relationship would only come to an end with one of us being in a body bag. I'd run out of hope, really, of what else I could do, just to try and manage it as best as I could, try and keep my daughter out of harm's way, try and limit his drinking. It was a real tough time. And we had come to a head in a prior incident, and I'd actually hit him with a hammer. Social services were then involved. I was then lucky that I didn't lose my daughter into the care system, because her dad had been killed in a motorbike accident some years before. And I guess my perpetrator kind of caught me at my lowest, when I was most vulnerable. To be honest, yeah, I couldn't see an end in sight. I'd been to parents' evening this particular evening. It was cold. I'd come home, was cooking dinner. And I have no memory from cooking dinner until I woke up in the hospital in a really bad way. So I had no information about the actual attack itself. The only witness to the incident was my daughter, and she was 8. And thankfully, my partner had phoned the police and told them that he had killed me. It transpired with the police asking me some very bizarre questions, that he hadn't attacked me with his fists. He had used a massive Italian pepper grinder from the kitchen, and he had beaten me with that many times until he thought I was dead. He then phoned the police and said, "I've killed her, you better come and take me away." My daughter had obviously woken up during the attack, and he had said to her, "You must stay down here with me. You can't go upstairs. Your mum's dead. We've got to wait for the police." The police came. My daughter said that he didn't answer the door. He just sat on the sofa rocking. So the police smashed the door in with a big battering ram type thing that they have. And then my daughter saw me being taken away, and the police took her to my neighbour's house, my good friend, who unfortunately passed away last year with a heart defect. But she was monumental support in getting me through the whole process, the court process. So just big up to Mandy. In the hospital, I didn't know why I was there. I didn't know what had happened. My friend had phoned me and said, "My God, we thought you was dead. Everybody thought you was dead." And I said, "What's happened? Where's my daughter?" And she said, "She's with me. We've had to smash your windows to get in, to get your school, to get my daughter's school uniform. My daughter's autistic, so she just wanted to go to school, do her routine." And my friend said, "It looks like John's tried to kill you. You know, we all thought you was dead." I was in 3 different hospitals in 3 days. I'd had some work. I nearly lost my eye. Every bone in my face had been broken. They was going to put metal plates all in my face. But I actually discharged myself from the hospital because I needed to see my daughter. I did look a bit like the Elephant Man, but I needed to see her and just tell her I was alive, I was okay. Then initially I got back on with my life. I unfortunately fell down the stairs because I could only see out of one eye, and broke some ribs in my back and my thumb and stuff. So was ordered to bed by my friends just to heal. But I did not want to stop it getting on with my life. The following year, it was my daughter's birthday party, and I had a call saying that he wanted to appeal against his sentence. He did plead guilty to a lesser charge of GBH with intent to kill. Oh, sorry, Poppy. Sorry, always a cat turns up. He was appeal against his sentence, which it broke me. It broke me as a person, and I felt that he didn't think he deserved the sentence that he got. And my life just kind of started crumbling in from there, to the point that I stopped leaving the house. I really became a heavy drinker. My life was in kind of tatters, but I still had some good friends. Go away, Poppy Cow. And then he had a parole hearing, which I was told that me and my daughter would have to leave our home, that if we stayed there, she would go onto a vulnerable child's register. So potentially I would lose custody of my daughter if I didn't move. So we had to move to a new area to start a new life. And my mental health deteriorated even more than I thought possible. To the point I would just sit in my bedroom with the TV on silent with the subtitles on. I wouldn't answer the door. I couldn't do anything. And I just kind of was hoping to die. Then a dear friend of mine had killed herself. So I saw the devastation that caused. So to me, that became not an option. I was completely trapped in my own mind. Thankfully, I found some support. I stopped drinking. I began moving forward with my life. My daughter was at a very difficult place in her life. She had begun taking drugs. She had been kicked out of school. And really, we was at rock bottom, absolute rock bottom. I got myself sober. It had only been a few short months. It was New Year, Christmas, New Year, new start, new beginnings. And I thought, I need to do something. I need to do something now to take control of the rest of my life. And I'd started trying to make contact through the prison with people that I knew was in prison with my ex, to try and arrange maybe a letter or something to try and find some closure. But within his sentencing, he wasn't allowed to contact me. So he was very dubious of what I wanted. But I was looking into fake IDs to get a visit to the prison. I knew I needed to see him. I knew I needed to look in his eyes and see if there was any hope for me to be able to move forward with my life, or if he would be out of prison and hunting me down. Or I just knew that was, I needed some closure, but I didn't know how to find it. Luckily, I had been supported through my whole journey because John had effectively got a life sentence. Depending on his release would depend on his behaviour while he was in prison. So I had an amazing victim liaison officer who had been with me through suicide attempts. She was amazing. And I contacted her and I said, I need to be able to write a letter. I remember the date, it was 4th of January. I knew she'd be back at work on the Monday. I was on her case as soon as she got there. And she said, okay, give it a couple of weeks, see if you still feel the same. I was adamant, I needed it now. She called me back and said, how would you feel about a face-to-face visit to the prison? Wow. That was what I'd wanted. I didn't know it could even be done. So she said, I don't know, there's a chance because it's domestic violence, it may not happen. So she then got in touch with Linda. And that is how my process started. I found it all to be very long. In fact, from start to finish of meeting with the restorative services and Linda and why me, actually it was a very quick turnaround. to the point I was at the prison having my visit. But I now clean and sober, I have addiction issues, which is kind of, I want a quick fix. I want this now. Why can't we do it today? Why does it need to be safe? You know, I kind of wanted to just get it done. Linda would ask me questions, you know, what do you want to say? What do you want out of this? All the questions I did not have the answers to. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I expected. I just knew that I needed it. And Linda managed to calm me down. She managed to guide me through what the process would be, what I may or may not get out of it. We started off after Linda had made contact with the prison, got the ball rolling. We started off with letters just as an icebreaker, kind of. I didn't want to go straight into the unknown, you know. If I wrote a letter and he responded, I could get a gauge of the situation. That for me was massive. It was reassuring. After the letters and the conversations between me, Linda, the perpetrator, all of that, and it was deemed safe, and that we both kind of were hoping for the same things out of it. We had our face-to-face conference in the prison. I was a nervous wreck, to say the least. Linda had asked me some strange questions. Did I want to be in the room first? Did I want him to be there? I decided, yes, I wanted him to be in that room first, so that I wouldn't be left waiting in case he changed his mind. And also, if I wanted to change my mind, I wouldn't have to go into that room. Linda at every point said, you only have to do this if you want to. If you don't want to go in, you don't have to. You know, we can cancel this at any point. And from the moment he walked in the room, oh, it was amazing. He had become a big black cloud over my whole life. Everything I thought, every time I tried to go out the door, just everything in my life had revolved around this monster, this great big black cloud that was holding me back. And he came walking in just as a normal human being, just one man, not this all-consuming monster. He started to cry and to snivel. And in an instant, I got my power. I said, I have not come here to watch you cry. I have not come here for this. I said, I'm going to go to the toilet. And when I come back, I hope that you've sorted yourself out so that we can, you know, we can do this. And sure enough, I came back. We had our conference. He had an amazing folder with all the things that he had achieved since he had been in prison, that he had remained sober, that he had been on lots of courses, that he had got a lifeguard badge, which I found infuriating. And I said, what? They've got swimming pools in prisons? And he remarked, oh, yes, at Stamford Hill they have. And I said, fucking hell, I live next door to the leisure centre and I am too scared to go in there. Which raised a few red flags with, you know, my location and things like that. But Linda's face was a picture. Her mouth almost hit the floor. But I didn't feel scared that he now knew where I was. You know, that was a complete accident that had come out. But I kind of felt glad because I didn't want to leave my previous home. I've never changed my phone number. I always thought that I'd rather know if he is looking for me or coming after me. I'd rather know that, if that makes sense. Kind of in a victim's mind, it makes sense to me. So I thought, kind of, if he wants to know where I am, he will find out. With the world that we live in, prior to that conference and me being face to face with him, if I had known that somebody had given him a kind of location, I think I would have been ready to move again. I would have been like, oh my God, this isn't safe. But the calmness that came during that meeting, and the hope and the power that had been missing. He had been in prison for 8 or 9 years at that point. I had not moved forward with my life. I was terrified when I knew, even though I knew exactly where he was, I was still terrified. I come away from the prison. I even supported his application for parole, and agreed that he could use the communication letters between us, because I did not want to be responsible for every year having a parole hearing, me being the one that makes the judgment of keeping him there. I wanted a clean slate from this. I wanted to be able to just say, if he gets out and he comes after me or he goes on to reoffend, that's not my responsibility anymore. I'd felt responsible for that. I'd felt responsible for his daughter losing her father. He was a single parent. I'd felt responsible for the impact that it had on her life, as well as my daughter and my own. And he was released shortly after that. He's still out of prison. He hasn't reoffended, as far as I'm aware. He's still a bit of a jerk, but, you know, you can't expect miracles. I think this is the longest that he's ever been out of prison. So in regards to having a positive impact on him, you know, I don't know if it has, but I'm pretty sure that it has, even though, you know, I don't have factual evidence of that. Like I said previous, my daughter was in a pretty tricky place herself. She finished college with distinction star. She has just gone on to university. She is going to be a police officer. Restorative justice has changed her life and her passion and her hope for better things. And she and I just cannot thank restorative justice enough for giving us a chance at life, a real chance at life, you know. I've been doing this with Linda now for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So restorative justice to me, I've always needed a hobby, something to keep me out of trouble. This is that. And if I can help make a decision easier for even just 1 or 2 people out there, that maybe they can go on and have a life like I have. I now work at a detox center for people with drug and alcohol issues. My daughter is an absolutely shining example of, if you've got the right encouragement and you've been shown the right path, how things can be. You know, she was getting into trouble. She was taking drugs. She had a problematic boyfriend, shall we call him, with control issues. She came to a domestic violence conference with me, and it opened her eyes to what was going on. You know, if I'm saying it, she kept saying, yeah, well, you don't trust anybody. You'll be single forever. Not everybody's like that. She came with me, saw it for her own eyes, the training that I was giving other people for signs to look out for, how the control starts. And she was like, you know what? Yeah. I'm sorry, I've waffled on quite a bit, and I appreciate you've probably got some questions, but I hope that just gives you a good understanding of kind of where my restorative justice story started right up to the present day of where we're at now.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really amazing to hear a little bit more, and it was good, really, really good to listen a little bit about that. I think it's truly important to hear the trajectory that you had, and such as your daughter said it herself, it helps other women to see the patterns. So thank you so much. And well, actually, we do have a few questions, if that's okay with you. And
Yeah.
maybe we could start by talking about this power that you felt with restorative justice. I found it really interesting that in the normal justice system, you didn't feel that, and you felt actually not seen by the policeman, as you said. So could you tell us a bit more about that?
The actual criminal procedure was awful. My ex-partner had phoned them, waited for the police to arrest him. He pleaded guilty. There wasn't really much opportunity for the police to get it wrong, but they did. The first court hearing, they hadn't requested any of my medical records. The judge was like, you haven't even got your case together. Go away. Come back with your evidence. I then had to contact the various hospitals, get all of my medical records together because they hadn't been lost. They had just never been requested. So I had to do a lot of that work myself, which you would think here that we have a pretty decent justice system, but it's variable. Actually, at the court proceeding, they had the pepper grinder in a clear evidence bag, and the policeman just kept waving it in my face and sort of using it as an aid, an extension of his arm. And I was like, my injuries were substantial. So the fact that he was waving it in my face was quite traumatic. Thankfully, my good friend was with me and said, I'm going to smash your face in with that in a minute if you keep waving it in her face, you know. And they said, oh, sorry, I didn't think. Then actually at the sentencing, he was given a 99-year IPA, which is a brand of beer here, is IPA. So I had no idea what that was. After the hearing, I spoke with John's legal team, who took me into a room. I'd known them previously, and they explained the sentence to me. Nobody at the court did. I didn't know what any of it meant, you know. Where he pleaded guilty, I still didn't know what had even happened that night, why the attack had happened, why, you know, why me, why then. So I was left with so many questions coming away from that I'd never got answers to. The next court hearing was when he was appealing against his sentence, and we had to go to the courts in London that are quite often on the news. Very intimidating place to be seen in front of 3 judges to make a decision. They didn't, you know, it went my way. He wasn't given any leniency. But nevertheless, it all just started collapsing in from there. So when I wanted restorative justice, not knowing what it was, I just wanted some answers, some answers that I hadn't got through court. I had just got questions. So initially, I wanted to know what had happened that night, that incident. My daughter hadn't spoke to me about it. She didn't speak to a counsellor about it. She just had made a video statement with the police, but I was advised not to see it. I was advised that I didn't want to hear the phone call that he had made that night saying that he had murdered me. So my imagination just went wild, and over sort of 8 or 9 years, it had just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled, and I just tried to fill in the blanks. So what I thought I wanted from restorative justice was why this, why that? Actually, it came about that he was not willing to talk about that night. And that was enough for me. So we kind of did a trade-off with Linda doing her to-in and throwing between both of us. We had decided that we wouldn't talk about the incident, which is what I had initially wanted to talk about. But I said, okay, if he's only going to agree to do it on those terms, I'm fine with that. And actually, as the process went along, it was more for me about having the courage to go, and for him knowing that I had the courage to be there and to sit across a table from him. During the process, I had requested that we have a table between us so that there was a physical barrier. I'd also been extremely worried about, would I be allowed a pen, something to twiddle with? Because I get quite, at the moment I'm shaking like a leaf, but I hope that's not coming across. I get quite nervous, so I wanted a pen. Then I think I phoned Linda. Oh my God, is he going to be allowed a pen? What if he's allowed a pen and he wants to stab my eye out? And Linda said, I don't think that's the case. But I was like, please make sure he hasn't got a pen or he hasn't got anything that he can injure me with. And I was most surprised. We don't have a big armed police here. We just don't really have them, except for extreme cases. I had thought there would be armed police, or at least a whole host of security and riot shields and all this protection between me and him. I think maybe I watched too many American films. And actually, it was just going to be a few of us in a room. He had taken somebody to support him, a lady that worked within the prison that had been supporting him. And I took my friend, who is also female. Linda is female, and so was her co-facilitator. And I just thought, we're a few women and we're going into a room with a monster. I kept thinking everybody was insane and we're all going to get murdered, we're not going to get out of there alive. Yeah, maybe I've got a slightly overactive imagination, but that's kind of where anxiety takes you. So for me, when we was in there and it was just us women and a few prison guards, just two sat a long way away playing cards. That was even more powerful, that he was there earlier perceived as this monster surrounded by delicate women and making him feel intimidated, and that I was the powerful one. Yeah, that power is something I never knew was missing, that I didn't have until I felt it, until I got it. As soon as I had seen his face and looked at him, it was like an inner strength, and sort of, I felt like Popeye or Amanda Nunes. I felt as strong as a goat, and I come out of there, and the smile and the relief, and I just thought, I am free. Actually, I can do this, you know. And my friends and my family were so worried that afterwards I may go back to drink, that it might destroy me. My God, it has inspired me to just go on and have my life. And yeah, it's a power that I didn't know was missing. And I cannot tell you other victims that I have met that have been through this, they ooze it too. And we kind of, it radiates through you, and it radiates through your family and through your friends. And they no longer have this fear of what kind of state you're going to be in. Because I think everybody around me was worried, you know, more about me than I was myself. And for them to see you with this strength and them to go, okay, she has got this now. She has got life now. I'm not saying it's like that for all people with restorative justice, but for domestic violence and for me, the power is what has been missing and has been beaten and ground out of you. And I didn't even know that I'd lost it until it was back. And that was years worth of power and strength. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I kept thinking about this. I think that her name was Danielle Surratt. She has the saying of the opposite of trauma is power and not a help. So if you truly want to prevent a trauma, you have to give power to the person. And that's amazing in your story, truly. And I actually have a few more questions because it's really interesting to see, especially because you got there thinking that you would have many questions and that you would have to recreate the story maybe. And I kept thinking about the storytelling in regard to trauma. So lots of people talk about how storytelling is something essential to overcome a trauma. And I would like to see what you think. So do you think that the narrative is something important to prevent or to overcome a trauma, the storytelling of the event that passed?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly for me, you know, I can't say in all cases, but being able to tell my story. Also, that day that I'd come back from the prison was a mutual friend of ours' birthday, and I'd bumped into a lot of friends of his as I was getting off the bus. And they was like, you know, oh, you're right, Luz, how are you? And I said, yeah, I've just been to see John. And they were all like, what have you done that for? Oh my God, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm better than okay. I'm better than he is. And just even being able to just say that to people that knew him, who had seen my struggle over the years, the fact that they saw me getting off a bus, they was like, wow, that's how instant my power was. And I could not wait to tell them how it had been. So I wanted to tell my story from the moment I got home to anybody that would listen, about this amazing thing, this amazing restorative justice, and the power of having a conversation. It's kind of changed my approach to everything in life. You know, if you've got an issue, talk about it. Not all people are willing to talk, but I run a support group as well for people with drug and alcohol problems, that just for them to be there and to be able to talk about their problems and to talk about their issues and know that there are other people that understand what they are going through. is more powerful than all the medication that I've been offered across my journey, for all the counselling. I am now getting therapy, but that's just kind of to get things in the right boxes. You know, I really want to be able to move forward with my life with the best chance possible. You know, I have a personality disorder, so sometimes things aren't always so easy, but they're definitely not so hard. And I think for any victim, being heard, having that opportunity to be able to talk to somebody and to be heard is massive with any crime. You know, if there's lots of old people living next door to me, it's a complex. Through COVID, I'd knock on their door, just see if they was okay, because previously I'd see them on the bus. And most of them don't know my name. They just know that I'm the girl who talks to them. And they always say, hello, love. Just to give them that opportunity to have a little chat during COVID times. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Is your back playing up? So I now talk, and when I ask somebody, are you okay? I mean it, rather than a hello, you know? And I just feel that if everybody could just jump on board with that a little bit, it doesn't cost anything. We would all be in a much better place, certainly. And as a victim, you don't have those conversations. You hold that stuff inside to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect the people around you. You keep that in, and that holds you back as a victim. That keeps re-victimizing yourself. If you can be in a safe enough environment that you can discuss those things, you start giving yourself the freedom to be able to move forward. But all the while, it's so taboo and people find it difficult to listen to. People don't want to hear it. That's how you feel. It's just in there. It's in there, just eating away at you. And everybody, a victim of whatever crime, needs to have that opportunity to be able to freely speak about the impact that it's had. Now, in our court process here, we have a victim impact statement that's meant to be a wonderful thing that gives a victim that voice. Actually, I didn't know anything about this after doing a lot of my own police work and having to get my own evidence. And of the day of the court hearing, I was asked for my victim impact statement. I had no idea what that was. The judge couldn't believe that one hadn't been done. A recess was called. I went off to a cupboard with somebody and some paper, and we quickly scribbled down this victim impact statement, which had I had time, I've prepared over many hours, you know. So kind of those are the shortfallings in our system here. So that opportunity that I did have, that I didn't know I was entitled to, was taken from me, just sort of to have a few 5 minutes to scramble some words together. So having that opportunity then later on, I only hope that other victims in this country and any other country get that opportunity to do their victim impact statement, to have their say. With it being a guilty plea hearing, there was none of that. There was no emphasis on the victim. I was just told then, you know, he's coming out of prison, you need to move. I was like, why do I need to move? You know, this is my home. So it is a case of the system that re-victimizes time and time again, even up until last year. I'd bumped into a friend during COVID times, and he said, oh, I saw John here the other day. He is not allowed in the town where I live. That is part of his license conditions, being released from prison. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, oh, his probation office is shut due to COVID, so he's having to come to Maidstone. And I was like, this is insane. I live here. If somebody is not allowed in one town in the whole country, why is he coming here? When thankfully I do this work with Linda. Linda knew somebody quite high up in the probation system, and we managed to get it sorted out. I had tried doing it just on my own through the proper channels. And I was told, yes, he would still attend probation here, but they would support me to move. So yet again, I was asked to move. I stood my ground. I am not moving again. I had to move last time. I'm not doing it this time. I work here. I live here. My daughters, we've got our life here. But I was denied. They said that he would still continue to come here. And it was only through the restorative justice process, knowing Linda had some contacts, that actually he was moved to a different probation service. If I hadn't have had those contacts, I would have been moved by now, because that was the only option that was available. That is not cost effective. That is insanity. The system is broken across the board. I was grateful that they would support me to move, but why should I have to? I am the victim of his crime. I did not go out and attack him. He did that to me. Why should he be able to continue with his life and I've got to move, restart, rebuild every time? Sorry, I've forgotten what the question was, but I do hope I answered it in there somewhere.
You certainly did. Yeah. And actually, I have another question in mind, because you were talking about your daughter and how this helped her too. So I was wondering, how was this impact of restorative justice in your family, and not only on your personal storytelling and experience?
Within my family, I did not feel comfortable telling them that I was going to be doing this. I needed to kind of make sure that it was right, that it was safe, and that I was doing it for the right reasons. So I had discussed it with my daughter, who just said, like teenagers do. And I had told my best friend, and they were the only two people that knew. Then as the process got underway and it was decided that it was safe enough for a prison visit, I told them, and everybody said, what are you doing that for? Why do you want to go and see him? God, you must be mad. Are you getting back with him? There was not a positive thing to say from anyone. Are you going to be able to cope with this? I think this is too much for you. So I kind of just got on with it on my own. And after the conference, I came home and spoke with my daughter, who could not believe this new person that had come home, that how different I was from the morning when she had left. I shake a lot, if a door bangs, I'll jump out of my skin. I'm very nervous. And I come swaggering in, and that day, my daughter could see the difference. In the days that followed from that, I had a conversation with her about it. We spoke about it. Teenagers are quite difficult to get conversations out of sometimes. And it opened a dialogue, and it opened up the hope for both of us. And she could just see day by day by day that I was growing, and was like, actually, this is a good thing. Then Linda contacted me and asked me if I would speak about it. It was quite soon after the conference. And I said, yeah, sure. I'm a cleaner. I was scrubbing somebody's floor. And I thought, a trip away? Yeah, I'm doing that. So I said, yep, I'll do it. I didn't realise quite what be involved. But so I told my daughter I'm doing it. Then my victim liaison officer, who had set the whole thing up, got in touch and said, if you're doing that, I think we better have a trial run. There was a big conference. I went and spoke at that. And then my daughter really started to notice, actually, this is real change. My mum started to notice, this is consistent change. You know, you are consistently making strides to get better. So my daughter kind of got distracted by, you know, the restorative justice stuff. And as much as she was still trying to be a difficult teenager, you know, this other side of her was coming through. I didn't force anything on her. It's her path. I just could guide her that there was a better way. Our relationship was at breaking point before I did this restorative justice process. And while my drinking was, you know, it was intolerable for her. She had also become my carer. She had been a carer for me since she was 12, since we had moved. So that impacted on her life dramatically. I couldn't go out the front door and do the food shopping. I could barely come out of my bedroom, and kind of, you know, the effect that must have had on her is really saddening now. But to see how strong she is now and how passionate she is. And she had been getting in trouble with the police. She is now studying to be a police officer because of that restorative justice-ness. By me sitting at home doing these things and her sitting on the sofa and listening and going, okay. She went to college to do public services, uniform public services. That's for the police, the army, kind of anything like that. They do that over here. And when she started, her tutor is a retired police officer. And he said, oh, restorative justice, that old crap. And that sparked something in her that is still burning now for her to get on board with this. She is kind and intelligent and passionate, and like we are for this restorative process. And those things I never thought I'd see in her. You know, we was in a real hard slog. My mum, my relationship with my mum has been pretty awful. I was a troubled teen. I ended up in the care system. My mum has some mental health issues that she cannot overcome. And her dialogue has never been very good. We've never had an open and honest conversation about anything. My mum will give me something random, whether it be a half-eaten chicken carcass. Her way of showing you affection is every time you go out the door, she'll give you something random. My house is full of random ornaments and stuff. So communication and love and hugging has never been part of our makeup. So I invited her to a domestic violence restorative justice conference. And it was a long journey. And she said, I was up there talking, and a lady said to her, you must be so proud of her. And my mum struggled, and she said, yes, I am. And she's a completely different person. And from that day, our relationship is wholesome. It has, you know, it has restored nearly 40 years of difficult times. So it has just had a massive effect on on my auntie, who has always been my biggest supporter. She is always there for me, but she had a lot of medical conditions. I dragged her to a conference. She just could not believe the difference in me as a person. Restorative justice has done that, and it has brought our whole family close together. We now have Christmas together, whereas we would all be in separate, lonely Christmas dwellings. We now come together as a group and we talk. We have conversations, which a stiff upper lip is the very British way, and sweep everything under the carpet, just suck it up and get on with it. We all know how traumatic that can be. So as a general, we have a huge family. There are lots of us, but we've now kind of all united together, and we are having family parties for the sake of it, pre-COVID, you know, just enjoying being with each other and having everything. Every single thing in my life is a million times better because of this restorative process, which is why I do this work, because I love it, and because being a victim of the system, having gone through it hasn't been easy since I was about 12. It had kind of just been a battle to stay alive, to survive. Myself, I've not always been on the right side of the law, you know. I've hurt people that I've come into contact with through my drug and my alcohol issues, and to now feel like I'm an actual valid member of society, that I am not a drain on resources, that I am not having the police called out to my home address every few weeks because my neighbours have reported another incident, and the police come and kind of roll their eyes and they're like, oh, if he's giving you a beating again, and you're looking at them saying, please, please help me, but you cannot say those words because he's there, you know, for all the trauma that I have caused myself, both to my daughter, to my family, to the wider community, that now I can give something back that is pure and is passionate. Did restorative justice change my life? 1,000,000%. And the community around me, with the voluntary work that I do and the passion I have for just wanting to give people a bloody good chance at life that haven't had that chance, and that has all come through this. Sorry, I could go on for ages, as you can tell. So
And I can listen for ages too. It's beautiful, yes. And I actually have one last question. I swear it's the last one. But what would you point out as the most important factor, or the core of restorative justice, of the restorative process for you? What do you see as the most important thing?
For me, I think knowing that it exists was the most important bit for me, because I had all these feelings that I didn't know if I was allowed to have as a victim, as a battered woman, which, why did I want to see him? Why did I want to do this? I didn't know restorative justice was a thing. So I had a lot of inner shame about that, and a lot of inner guilt that maybe there was something wrong with me, that maybe because I wanted to kind of draw a line under it, why didn't I get that from, you know, everybody was saying he's in prison, that's enough. So for me to have it validated that it's an actual thing, and there's actually people that are out there doing these restorative services, was a relief for me, because I kept thinking, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to go to the prison? Why do I need to see him? Why do I want to write a letter? So it was kind of, there were so many whys that when that was I was explained to about it, the relief that actually other people want answers too. Oh, it's not just me. And then knowing that there was a service out there for that. Like I said, in the beginning, I wanted, why did this happen? I was quite aggressive with it. I wanted to just go and, going through it, going through the process of them, Linda and her coordinator listening to me. I think even if the restorative process hadn't have happened, I would have still come out happy, because I would have got a gauge on where he was, whether he was ready for it, whether my intuition was right. And the further the process went on, the less important the end goal was. So when we did have that conference, that was, and I got my power back. It was all very amicable. We agreed not to talk about the past. So it was all very on the surface. It was very nice. I did feel I got everything I needed from it. But when I got home after seeing his friends, I got a little bit angry. And I thought, actually, I want to tell him how it's been for me. So I just grabbed a pen and paper and I started writing a letter. And I didn't know if I was going to send it, if it was just for me to get those things out. So I wrote a letter saying, thank you for the conference today. No hard feelings, but kind of the last few years have been really crap for me. I've tried to kill myself on multiple occasions. I've been too scared to go out of the house. My daughter's life has suffered monumentally. Actually, it hasn't all been great, but I found the strength to get sober and to do this process. I hope you can too. Have a nice life. Posted it, sent it, spoke to Linda the next day and said, oh yeah, I felt that there were some things I wanted to say, but I didn't feel comfortable saying face to face. So I've written him a letter and posted it off. Much to Linda was horrified. Oh my God, what have you sent? What have you written? And I said, well, I did take a photo, some photos. I'll send them over. Sent them over. She phoned back and said it was a perfect case of a shit sandwich. Start off with the bread, go with the shitty filling, and then, I'd finished it off quite nicely. So, and I think we both learned a lot from that. It's kind of, with it being quite new over here as well with domestic violence, I think I even ran the training day that Linda was at to get her training, which was after our conference. So it's new here, and there's a lot of things, trial and error. Like with you guys, it's just kind of trying to get a fair system and get things rolling. So I'm sorry, I forgot what the question was. But again, I hope I've answered it.
I'm sorry, I had my mute on. Yeah, so actually I asked you what was the center of the restorative justice process and for you. And I think that you answered very well. We can get the idea behind it. And that was all of our questions. And thank you very much for sharing your experience and your story. I think it was very, very brilliant to actually be able to talk about this. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And we have a few questions from the public with Julia. So if you could please open your mic.
Yes, sure. Thank you. And thank you, Lucy, for everything. I'm like totally speechless. I don't even know what to say. Just thank you for everything you said to us. You're so strong and inspiring. Your story just got me like, I want to hug you. Just feel like I'm hugging you right now, please. Thank you. It's so precious for us to have someone like you telling your story, telling us everything you've been through and how your life changed. I'm just feeling like I really want to keep applying restorative justice after I've listened to you. I'm like, let's do this forever because the impact is so huge, it's so amazing. I personally don't see how we can think of something else outside restorative practices. I don't think it's possible. But of course, we need to think about the best way to apply it. Here in our country, we've got some issues, some difficulties, but listening to you, I think you're giving us hope to keep trying to applying it in Brazil. So thank you so much. People on chat are telling that your story are saying that your story is so beautiful and that they are like so touched with your speech. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask the first question of the public to Linda. Linda, in addition to the reparative and empowering potential for the victim, what is restorative justice potential for proper awareness for the offender to engage in a change in sexist behavior and beliefs?
Yes, thank you. That is a very interesting question, and I kind of gone from the difference, was thinking about it between I can never say the word misogyny. Thank you. I can never say misogyny, and the difference between that, which I almost equate to the same as a hate crime, like a racist hate crime or an LGBT hate crime, compared to say some of the offenders that we work with, the domestic abuse and sexual abuse, where there are mental, it's not attitudes, if you like. It could be psychological or a psychiatric issue. But certainly I see a lot of potential for restorative justice to educate and to increase understanding, and particularly with hate crimes, that I often have heard that, if I can change one person's attitude, then it's worth me doing restorative justice. And it is about that education. It's about, there's always that fear of the unknown, of fear of people or cultures, or that you don't understand. And if restorative justice does that and helps to break those barriers and bring down those barriers, then I think that certainly is another benefit of it, not just for the individuals involved, but in society as well. And I'm going to go on. We ran last year. We called it a restorative listening forum, and that is where we ran it in particular to people who'd been subject to race hate by the criminal justice system and the police system, and we run it on restorative principles. And again, it was a chance for people who'd been affected by those kind of attitudes to say how they feel, and for others who were listening to be able to understand what that means. And certainly I was talking earlier about some of the work we've done with LGBT hate crime, where it's been an organisation abuse or a crime. And that's given those organisations a chance to think about what their policies and procedures are and perhaps change them so they are more inclusive.
Thank you, Linda. The other question is to Linda. In your opinion, what are the biggest difficulties facing the UK today in applying restorative justice? Is there anything that can be advanced?
Okay, I think the number one action is that restorative justice should be embedded into law. And as I think I said earlier, that all victims have the right to be referred to a restorative justice service. And in England and Wales, we're hoping this year, or maybe now next year, that there is a new victims law, and that right is enshrined in legal in legal terms, and then there's no getting away with it. There's no saying, oh, we can't do restorative justice because it's there in law. I think the funding, and I think all restorative justice services should have what we call it ring fence, so secure money to be able to run restorative justice. I think there should be, I could go on, this is another one I could go on all day about, that in this country, everybody has the same criteria for accepting a referral for restorative justice. We have in effect 43 different systems based on local area for restorative justice. That is not efficient, and that does not. And there are times that a victim can be a few miles within a border and would get the service in one county but wouldn't get it in another. So they would get it, might not get it in London, but they would get it in Kent, for example, or in the north of England. That's not right. That needs to change. That is, we call it what we call here a postcode lottery. So it's not a uniform service across the country, and that's where Why Me picks up a lot of cases that other services won't do for one reason or another. For example, it might be a reported crime, but for some reason the police decided not to prosecute. They're still a victim. And yes, it's difficult because they're still, the person responsible might not admit it, but they're still a victim. What sort of closure do they have? And some services won't take those cases, and then Why Me picks up on them. Yeah. So I would say in summary.
You can continue.
No, I would say
feel free to say more, please.
No, I would say I've got my my communications manager key messages coming through. I think yes. Enshrine in legal terms, in legislation, restorative justice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. And the next question is for Lucy. Lucy, do you think the British criminal justice system was effective in helping you with your conflict at the time?
I mean, it did what it needed to. He was imprisoned. I mean, he pretty much put himself there. I did not feel that it was crap, for want of a better word. Yes, he was imprisoned, but my life could not continue. It was pretty horrendous. I didn't get anything good out of the whole process, other than that he was in prison and that he may be released at any point. That's kind of how I felt, because he didn't get a definitive sentence. I didn't know if he'd be out in a year, in a month, in 100 years. So for me, it was just living on a knife edge, really, just waiting for what I felt, for him to be released and for me to finally be murdered. That is what I felt that his aim was. So no, it caused me massive anxiety. I think it might have been better off. I don't know how it could have been much worse, to be honest. I mean, I am grateful that he was imprisoned. I feel like if he hadn't have phoned the police himself, it could have been a very different story, Yeah. I didn't find any of it good.
Thank you, Lucy. The next question, it's kind of similar. Lucy, what do you think of the offender's arrest as an alternative? Do you think prison is efficient in some cases?
Sure. I'm sure prison is efficient. It's what we do with it as well. Only in my personal case, prison was not enough to stop my ex-partner reoffending time and time again. Since restorative justice, he hasn't reoffended. That's my case. That's all I know. But I think, you know, having to be accountable, having to face up to what you've done, having to look that person in the eye can go a long way. Having been a criminal myself, if I'd ever had to face anybody that I had wronged or harmed or stolen from, I probably never would have done it ever again. You know, I would have been like, oh my God. And I didn't realize the impact that all those, I call them minor crimes, because I thought, well, I'm not killing anybody. Since this, it's just to learn that knock-on effect, that everything has a consequence and people need to be accountable for that and to face their victims. You know, from early years at school, you know, if you've done something wrong, you say sorry. But to go and say sorry to somebody whose kid, you know, you've stolen their pencil sharpener is a bit more impactful than just having to say sorry to a teacher and giving it back, you know? I think we've all got so much to learn about restorative justice and where it can be applied, which I think is kind of just about everywhere. It is just getting that awareness across, and hopefully you guys and us, we are all on this kind of, we're just at the beginning. And the more people that can get interested, it should become a way of life for all of us. And it as part of our criminal process, you know, victims count, victims matter, and perpetrators seeing those victims being strong, it can have such a difference. I just beg the world to wake up, be kind to one another, have a more restorative approach, just in general. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Lucy. The next question is for Linda. Linda, in the beginning, you mentioned that not always it's possible or viable to apply restorative justice. Do you think that through development and experience, one day it will be possible to embrace more cases?
Absolutely, and I can only go from my, you know, what has happened in this country. That when I started, I've been involved in restorative justice for over 10 years, but actually a practitioner since 2016. In 2016, very few services were doing restorative justice with sexual abuse cases. Now, however, several years later, it is the norm. And I was talking to a colleague on Wednesday who's doing some research into restorative justice and sex offenders, and he's talked about 40 services, and only one does not take those kind of cases. So I think we are seeing a slow progression into what people see as acceptable to use restorative justice, or more, there's a more realization of the power and how it can be applied to different types of crimes.
Thank you, Linda. The next question, it's very similar to, it's for you. Linda, do you think it's possible to apply restorative justice to murder homicide cases? Have you treated any cases in this sense?
A simple answer is yes. And personally, I have never. I've had been to murder cases, but they didn't go anywhere. I personally have not done a conference with that. But yes, I would suggest to the person who's asked that question, have a look at a website for the Chris Donovan Trust. And Ray and Vi Donovan's, their son was murdered almost 20 years ago. And they've been through a restorative meeting with the three men that were convicted of Chris's murder. If we have I can always put that in the link, or send it to you later, Julia, that link. And you can see the power of restorative justice there. And not only have Ray and Vi gained a lot of healing and forgiveness through restorative justice. They've gone on to work. They do a lot of work in prisons about telling their story, to tell the dangers of knife crime. They do a lot of work in schools, and their story is so powerful. And they've taken a negative thing and they've made it into a really positive thing. The same way as Lucy has taken something quite really negative, but you've turned that experience into something really positive. So, I mean, I'm kind of any crime. Why not? Well, let's look at what restorative justice can potentially do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. The last question is for Lucy. Lucy, do you think restorative justice should be applied to all gender-based violence as a form of empowerment?
As with, gender-based violence, it can be such a minefield area. I think it should be, but I think every individual case, every individual victim and perpetrator needs to be assessed. There's scope for I needed it for my power. I just would hate for it to be used in the wrong hands, where a victim can be re-victimized. But I definitely think that because of the nature of gender-based violence, people are so scared of those other outside factors, and where it may be going. The people are too scared to hold the restorative justice conferences for people like myself. But every case should be, assessed on its individual merit. But yes, it was the only thing that has allowed me to move forward and to grow with my life. So while, yes, I understand it has its dangers, and it is very complex, every case needs to be judged independently, individually, and not just under one whole umbrella, because of the sensitive nature of it. When I was at my conference at the prison, my ex-partner had worn my favourite aftershave. I don't know if that was a bid to try and get me back, but it needed a little bit more than some cool water aftershave to right the wrongs that he had done. But I was at a place where I did not want to get back with him. I can see why maybe parties would agree to this that aren't quite so safe. I just think with caution, but yes, it definitely should not be ruled out just because of the crimes that have taken place.
So I guess that's all of our questions for today. I think there's nothing more in the chat. Yes. So we really appreciate you both coming here today and having this dialogue with us. So first of all, we would like also to thank the University of São Paulo for giving us this opportunity, and as well as our study group, USP Restaura, and all of our researchers, especially the coordinators, Cristina Rego de Oliveira and Eduardo Sagnis. And also we would like to thank Lucy and Linda for coming here today, having this moment, sharing their experiences, and to thank Ben Andrew from YME for having supported this event and holding it since the beginning, and Renata Araújo for helping us with the first contact with Ben, Julia, of course, with her contacts and her emails and everything. And last but not least, we thank the organization, Why Me, for promoting this event with us. And thank you both, Lucy and Linda, for coming, sharing your experiences. It's been really great having you here. And we hope to see you soon. We are sure it will be the first of many events and projects that we can maybe share and have together. So thank you very much. Julia, would you like to say something here at the end?
Yes, I would like to thank again Linda and Lucy. Linda, because of the so many emails I've sent to her in over 2 months. But I'm so happy for this space, for hearing you girls. It's been incredible. I'm so I don't know. I'm feeling very glad of hearing you and maybe to start seeing restorative justice better after hearing you and your stories and your experience. I really hope to visit you someday in London. For sure, I will someday. And you're so sweet. You have so much to teach us. And thank you. I hope we can think of something for the future, maybe. And that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything. Do you want to say something before we finish the transmission?
I'd like to say thank you for listening and giving me this opportunity. It's such a nice feeling to know that, you know, there are people around the world that are seeing this. You know, I was like, wow, Brazil, you know, it's amazing, and I'm just so grateful to be part of your show today.
Yes, I mean, thank you as well. I mean, I don't facilitate many cases as I used to when I facilitated Lucy's case. And I think coming here and hearing your questions and hearing Lucy again, it just reignites my passion for it. And Me really wants to continue pushing the barriers and the boundaries of using restorative justice with domestic abuse and sexual violence. So we're at start of a journey ourselves, and here's to the future, really. And I hope you guys in Brazil can be able to use restorative justice more out there.
Thank you, girls. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, USP Restaura, University of São Paulo. And see you guys in another opportunity very soon, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want us to stay on after you stop recording?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Please. Stay a bit more. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's watching.